Hi, everybody. This is Help Me Be Me. This is Sarah Mae Bates, and today I'm talking about knowing your thrive zone. Other titles for this episode were Splitting from Truth, Shedding the Second Arrow, Witnessing Transformation. I think broadly, this is an episode all about knowing how to reward your inner self as you move through the world, because that changes, whatever we need changes. And I think we need to have a sense of our own spiritual and also egoic priorities. Like we need to understand what both of those things are and ensure that we are respecting that truth, our truth at all times. Because if we don't do this, if we don't stay conscious, is what happens is we end up feeling outside of ourselves. Maybe we feel anxious, maybe we feel empty, maybe we feel numb, disconnected. Maybe we also just don't like ourselves. We feel unworthy or of low value because we have not validated ourselves with our own actions. And so I think what's important is knowing that as you advance through different life stages, your needs will change. Like what you require to feel honored will change. And so we really do need to tune in to see what's sitting right with us, what's true for us, and take steps to amend our behavior so that we are in line. And we kind of need to have, in order to even be able to tune in, we have to have a large part of our life where we are conscious. So by that I mean like fully aware of all the parts of ourselves, not just when we're in that going, checking boxes stage, Like it's one thing to just be sober from substances, but it's another thing to also be fully in the seat of your life. Like I know for myself, I've had periods of my life where I would just like working. And then one day I looked up and I was like, it's Christmas again? What happened to the year? And that's what I mean by you can go unconscious in other ways other than just putting stuff in your body. So either way, we have to understand what leaves us feeling fulfilled holistically in our life. And that is, I think, something we have to make a priority is to just check in and really remain kind of grounded in the way we create our lives, which I think also requires we stay very aware of what our leanings are, like what our old coping mechanisms are that tend to rear their heads. For me, it's a a scarcity mindset will often rear its head of not enough. I need to work harder. I need to double down because it's never going to be enough. That's like one leaning I have. And I also have a leaning that's like a what I call workahol, which is like I just numb out with doing and I don't even notice it's happening. So just be aware of whatever your things are so you can make sure to temper them as they take over. So if you are a person who is feeling any of those things, anxious, empty, numb, disconnected, maybe you're not don't feel like you like yourself, know that the path to renewal and growth and energy is actually tapping into the underbelly of what we have been pushing away and asking, what am I hiding from? What am I not listening to? Because when we make contact again with that thing, we restore a connection to a part of ourselves that allows us to feel like we accept all of us. And when we ignore it instead, when we continue to push something down and muscle over it, it just gets increasingly more haunting. Like the split off self makes us feel like we're not good. Some part of us isn't good. And it also means that we are capable of violating ourselves, violating a part of ourselves and our true values. And this is like this process of splitting means we have a truth that's under, and then we have like an operating system that's making do with what is, and is just saying, I'll deal with it anyway and I'll make it okay anyway. So the divide between those two truths gets bigger and bigger. And that is how we create a life where we're like, I don't feel good about this. I don't know who I am. So, with that, there are three parts to this episode: the what, the why, and the how, the tools. Part one, the what. As I said, the thing that happens when you feel a bit numb or split from yourself. And I think this happens when we are not acknowledging something that is true for us. So we may notice it, but then what happens is like an old protective mechanism takes over and kind of forces us to own that thing and be okay with that thing. So, an example of this, like a common example of this, is like you're in a relationship that isn't right. And because the truth is inconvenient, the truth is, I'm afraid to be alone. You push it down and you push it down. And when we start to rationalize away our anger, we tell ourselves all of the reasons why it's actually good and why we're actually happy. So that's like a split. The splitting from something that activates us. So in that initial moment of I'm unhappy in this relationship, we physically know deep down, hey, this what's happening right now in my life is not okay with me. We know that. But for whatever reason, we don't honor it. We push it down. And it's often because we don't know what the solve is. Maybe the solve is too inconvenient. Maybe we feel insecure. Maybe we don't think we can handle whatever the thing means. But whatever happens, we just separate from that truth. The truth still exists, but then ego takes over and uses a defense mechanism to protect us and own, takes over a dominant, empowered identity in the face of that situation. So, what I would call that, my brain takes over and explains to me why it's all good. I would call these like scripts, they're scripts or protective mechanisms. And so, when something in our life causes us to feel suffering to survive, we tell ourselves one of these scripts. And that's how we control it. That's how we feel a sense of power and agency over something that otherwise makes us feel powerless. And usually, the reason that we do this in the first place, the reason that these scripts even come up and that we do split is because it's old. It's an old tactic from childhood that allowed us to survive as a kid. It was a very effective strategy. But as an adult, that is no longer effective as a strategy because we are actively perpetuating something that is not what we truly deep down want. And also, the scripts themselves are often based on untruth and they are exhausting and draw tons of energy. It's like we run in a big giant circle away from a problem and we write a long story about the problem to explain it away to ourselves or to make us feel like we're in control of it. However, all that does is just create more work for us, more delay in our lives for us to change our lives in a way that will make it better. And so, what happens when this is happening in your life perpetually is we just feel like I don't know why I am in this situation, but I'm knee deep in it and I can't seem to get my way out of it. It feels like you're kind of trapped. It can feel like I don't know how to change my life. I'm lost because this old trigger is the real cause. The old trigger is the feeling. It's the feeling of, I'm afraid to be alone. That might be the trigger. Or the feeling of, I don't like to be out of control. I really can't stand feeling like I'm not in control. Whatever that feeling is, we spend so much time in that long narrative and that long script. And what really just needs to happen for this whole thing to go away is for us to reckon with the truth of what's being said internally in this belly down here. And the more we suppress what is true for us or neglect or ignore it, the more dangerous it becomes because it's just creating a lived experience that we watch in third person and see, oh, I am this kind of person. See, look, I'm doing all these things. I am this kind of person that lives this kind of life that is with this type of person, whatever it is. So it's like you identify with it because it's been happening for so long. And through that time, the split has just been, for such a long period of time, it's like we forget that there's a truth down there. And we feel alienated from ourselves and we don't know ourselves. It's like you're living from the neck up. So if you are a person that might feel unhappy, you might feel trapped, you might feel impotent, you might feel powerless, like you cannot change, which brings me to part two, the why. I mean, outside of all the reasons I already talked about, I think a lot of people forget that they change. They forget that they go through seasons in their life, chapters in their life. Their values will actively shift depending on your experiences, but also your age. And so when your priorities change and what you want changes, often we're not even aware of that on a conscious level. So we might start to apply old strategies to deal with the new needs that are arising. And that's partly because we think that the needs are wrong. Like we don't see them as true for us. And maybe they will feel like not you, you know? I'm one, for example, is like one day you might say, I just want stability. I just want monogamy. I just want predictability. Or I just want no stress. Some new stage arrives in your life, and that'll be something that's evident to you when your body gives you feedback of that truth. And so, in that moment, it's not our job to just suck it up harder or control it with an old coping mechanism. We actually have to notice, oh, something doesn't sit right. Something feels wrong to me. I don't feel good about what's happening. And respect it and tune in and ask, where's this feeling coming from? What is it? What is it that's making me feel like this? I'm not happy with this situation. Because our body's giving us constant feedback about where we stand on any given thing. One thing I encourage on this show constantly is really starting to identify the difference between like our kind of inner wisdom, what I'll call like that quiet inner listener, the quiet watcher, the inner child, whoever, whatever label you want to give to it, and then the spinning, thinking ego, and really be able to just listen for what is true versus if there's chatter, if it's like very, very chaotic and noisy, there's a difference in the energy between this voice and then the one that whispers. And I'm going to call this like inner self as kind of like your spiritual self. This is also the self who will express your needs through the unconscious, through dreams, through behaviors that just arise, you know, that you don't even understand or have context for sometimes. So when you like here's an example of how this might occur. Like you might know you need to do something, or you know you have to do something. Like you have to, I don't know, sign up for law school, and then you notice your body just can't do it. That's like your inner wisdom knows. It's just it can't. So that's like you're noticing there's a split between the ego and the inner self. So when we can listen really intently to that inner voice, whatever it is, and validate it with our own behavior, align our behavior behind what that self wants, we immediately guide our life toward what will make us happiest and what will allow us to thrive and feel the healthiest. And instead, what we often do is we try and tell a new story about how we're going to make whatever conditions we're going to make do with all of the current situation. So, if this is feeling like true for you in any shape or form, I invite you to just scan for something in your life recently and ask, am I using any strategies to take control of situations in my life right now that need my intention, need my attention? Freudian slip, perhaps. Anyway, with that, I'm going to go into part three, the how, the tools. But first, a brief word from our sponsors. Okay, the tools. Part one, or tool number one, hate excavation. I know this sounds so negative, but it's actually a good tool. It's a positive tool. So if there is a person in your life that is, or a person that is not in your life that you interact with, who really sets you off and brings out your worst or an intense feeling of cringiness, That is a sign that they have traits that you are rejecting in yourself. So the tool is to use this as a process of inquiry and ask, what is this feedback telling me about me on me? Like let's think of the last person that you were just like, I hate them. What was it about them that you hated? Like what was the triggering ingredient? And now step two, maybe do this in your journal. What do I need to do in my own life to reclaim this part of myself? Like, what part of myself do I need to gather or tap into somehow? And this is a really interesting process because what you might find is it's something that you very young were taught was not okay, that you were shamed for, that it will be some small experience that at the time you probably think didn't matter at all, but it has become internalized and in some shape or form. And in your mind now, you think that equals bad. So, all that this exercise does is just give you a little bit of a nugget of insight into awareness around intolerance in yourself. And my invitation is really just to, once you know what the thing is, just soften toward that thing in yourself and see, now that you know it, how can I like reclaim this part of myself in my life? How can I be softer toward myself when this area arises moving forward? All right, next tool is called the spiritual self. So this tool is really just focusing on acknowledging your own boundaries and being accountable to your own boundaries, despite all of the self-protective mechanisms that override whatever some boundary really does mean for you. So when, let's say you're going through a change in your life, maybe you're going through, you're maturing in some shape or form, wherever you're feeling like something didn't sit right with you, something's out of alignment, I want to invite you to journal on the last experience when that occurred. So specifically, take whatever it was, whatever ordinary interaction happened to be when you felt I didn't like how I acted, or I didn't like how that ended. I don't like the situation that came out of this experience. So the journal prompt is scan for the last experience that left you feeling bereft or confused about yourself and your own behavior, and ask, what was the first moment I split from myself? Next prompt, what was little me saying, like the inner spiritual self? What was I saying that I ignored? And what was true for me that I ignored? And then last prompt, what coping mechanism took over in that moment? And that's a juicier, kind of longer reflection because usually the coping mechanism will be something like, I wanted to feel in power. I wanted to feel liked. I wanted to feel unafraid. It'll be something really logical, but it's hard. Sometimes it's hard to see what that coping mechanism is. Okay, next tool, know your type, respect your engine lights. One thing it took me a really long time to realize in my adult life was the importance of personality type in what you choose to do with your life. And by that I mean like you can be the most creative person in the world, and you could also have the most sensitive nervous system that makes it almost deadly for you to be in a role where people are constantly criticizing you, like being on the stage, for example. And I think personality type is almost more important in this example because of how that setting will erode your sense of safety and happiness over your life. So this tool is just for you to tune in and ask like what you can tolerate and really respect the truth, the facts, the history of what allows you in particular to thrive or shut down. And I just want you to be really, really in tune with that list of things, you know? Some people naturally need to have a very low stress lifestyle because that is the range that does not break harm their chemicals. I think it's really important to understand also your danger zones, like your leanings. I kind of talked about at the beginning, but like for me, that's workahol. I lean into just falling into that unconscious go 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 mode if I don't pay attention, if I don't stay conscious and step back from it. And so the goal is for us to really know ourselves innately, like we have our own little manual in the glove box of our body, and we know what equals truly happiness and fulfillment for us. So, what I'm inviting you to do is just think through, do I know what the edges of my functioning zone are? Like when that oil light is coming on, what does it look like? What does it feel like? When is this a recent situation when that occurred? Can you tell when you're near that zone? Just be very, very respectful of that. There are such things as stress-induced seizures. There are such things as heart attacks. Panic attacks. Know when your body is getting close to being like, I need a break. I need a break, and respect that so devoutly. It is not trivial. Okay, next tool, get outside of you. One of the reasons that AA and religion are so healing is they allow us to connect to something that is higher than us and they humble us. They reduce our size in our own mind. And I think having something that is bigger than you and more ultimate is a relief. It's a relief to the ego just to feel that there's something more than ourselves. I think one thing that's happened in Western culture it's kind of been forever in Western culture just to be very individualistic, but I think that's kind of spreading all over the world. But I think one byproduct of being in an individualistic society is that you end up feeling depressed and empty and anxious because it's all on you. It's all about you. So it's no wonder, you know? When the only thing that defines your life is you and how you're doing, it's like the stakes are so much higher. So the tool, I'm just like, go get a belief system. That's kind of what the tool is. But I'm not just saying it as a joke. I mean it for real. I did not have anything that I thought was higher. I didn't believe in anything. And I was like, I don't I'm not attracted to this idea. I have nothing that's pulling me toward it. It kind of freaks me out. I have baggage with religion. But my therapist at the time said, just start with the intention and the rest will come. If you want the grounding and the relief that comes with a belief in something higher, just start with the intention for that to be true and act as if, and the rest will follow. Even if you have baggage, even if you literally don't believe in anything, start with an intention and start to move your actions in resuming openness to something, openness to anything. That's the tool. That's it. That's all I'm inviting. All right, the next tool is a journal exercise. It's called hugging into the feeling. And this has two parts. But the first half of this is, so when we are in that state of rumination and we are in the process of just spinning, we're replaying something, we're debating something, we're keeping ourselves up at night trying to solve something. As soon as you notice that feeling, I want you to ask yourself in your journal, what am I refusing to accept? And then follow up prompt. Once you can just kind of free associate on that first question, it's usually something like, I really don't want to have to do this thing. I really don't want to lose blank. I don't want to feel blank. It's something like so simple and childlike. And the second prompt is, how can I support myself in the face of this thing? And oftentimes it's like you just need a hug. You need to process it. You need to be allowed to feel it. Just sit with it for a moment. Sometimes you need to make an appointment with somebody. Either way, that's the first half of the tool. Second half of the tool is how to do this in real time. So when we are pushing something away, that's the beginning of a splitting thing. So instead, I'm asking you just like go right into it. This tool is called welcome it, flip it over, love it. So when before we create the giant novel in our heads, the script around what the thing is and what it means and why it's okay or whatever it is, all those unrelated red herrings, we can't in our actual actions, what we're doing is saying like, but I can't feel the thing, but I can't feel the thing. In that moment, something needs to just be allowed to be said and allowed you need to witness yourself in a feeling. So, our job is to shed that second arrow of judgment, take out all of what it means, and try to just welcome in the thing that you're feeling. Welcome it in as true and just allow it to sit in your body. See how does it feel? What does it mean? Let's say it's I don't I don't like this relationship. I don't like what's happening right now. Let's just allow it to be in your body. Allow it to be true. Don't tell a story about it. And the last part of this tool, how how can that be a good thing? How is that a good thing? Try and see that feeling as something positive and ask like, okay, it's a good thing. How is this a good thing? It's a good thing because I can voice my needs and make change. It's a good thing because I need to start to build myself up in my own life. It can mean so many things, but the truth is ultimately always a good thing. It's always a good thing because it's going to allow us to get aligned with the truth of what we want in our lives. All right. Next tool is growth case building. Um, I One of the things I love to do most is go back in my journal and look at change that I've made and look at the entries before the change happened and see what I was thinking. Really just revisit that time and think about how you felt and how far off that thing seemed and how impossible that thing seemed. So just try this. Go back in your journal, ask what was the last time I made a big leap and I really didn't think I was capable of something, but I had a lofty idea of what I wanted to try. And then just imagine yourself back in that body, back in that time. And then the second half of this is put yourself back in the body of the person who was trying the thing for the first time, who was moving through the change. What did it feel like in your body when you were going through the change? It probably felt like, I don't know what I'm doing. I'm doing this wrong. I'm probably going to fuck up. It probably felt very uncertain and very scary. And the reason I wanted to invite you to do this reflection is because 99% of change is just moving your body. It's just moving through something despite how you feel and not allowing the narrative and the self-pity to dominate, really training ourselves to set your goal and just go toward it. And also making sure that you're creating a positive default in your memories. So I mean, this is a tool for just remembering you've done a lot of cool shit. You've done a lot of big shit. Made a lot of change in your life not too long ago. It's still happening. So just stay in that narrative and keep your scope of hope as wide as it needs to be. Remember how much is possible. Stay conscious of how much is possible. Everything is possible at all times. All right, next tool. This is a little bit of a version of a past tool. I get to do this. It's a little bit of like a reframe. I mean, one thing that you realize when you start to reframe everything in your life as what would I do when you ask yourself, what would I do if I was free? What would I do if I didn't have to do anything? What would I choose to do right now? Usually what you find is I actually think I might choose to do the same thing, but now that I know I'm choosing it from this vantage point, it feels different. It feels like really positive and good because it's like I'm choosing it from this lens. So this tool is the same kind of thing. It's like just a lens change. If you are overwhelmed, if you are in high demand, if you are very busy, if you have, so many irons on the fire, reframe that in your mind. If you start to get overwhelmed, you start to get stressed, you start to feel put upon, whatever it is, I get to do this. I have so many people that want me. I have so many projects that I'm in such high demand, or I I'm in a relationship situation and it's very conflicted. I am so blessed that I have people who really want me in their lives. It's just a subtle reframe that actually, once you can really feel into it and imagine it, it does make you feel good about the thing. It's like everything has two sides to it, positive and a negative. Okay, great. And then the next tool is a mantra. Does this need to be solved right now? One thing that I just wanted to bring up is if you are a person who is creative, if you are a person who has received an ADHD diagnosis, I feel like every single person I know in the world has that diagnosis because they are creative. I think they're kind of one and the same. But I just want to say, if you are a very sensitive person, you get a lot of feedback from the world into your body. There is a thing that happens where we have so much input coming in. We have so much that's activating us. We're thinking through so many things. It feels so visceral that we feel like we have to be activated. We feel activated by that content all the time. And so often the goal is not to act on it, not to call the person, not to make the apology, not to explain ourselves, not to interpret everything that the other person is thinking, not to defend against all of the things they might be thinking, et cetera, et cetera. Our goal is instead to just sit with that feeling and tolerate it. Sit with the feeling, the feedback, the anxiety, the overwhelm, and just tolerate it. And I think if we can hit pause, what it does is it allows that back, or what I call the back of your head, the deeper part of your reflective thought, to digest everything and compute a different answer. And usually what also happens in that just like delay that we've created for ourselves is a truth will present itself outside of us. And it's like it's taken off of our plate. So if you are a person that feels like that might be true for you, you feel constant narrative around what other people think. You feel constant narrative around what you said that was wrong or how other people perceive you. Know that that is partly because you are a very raw nerve. You're very oversensitive, which is a gift, and also it can be activating. In the moment that you feel you have to act, take a breath and try and tolerate. Breathe through it. Allow it to just sit with you and help yourself to process it, to let it flow out of you. Don't act on it. And just see how that stretching out of response time allows another truth to be demonstrated to you. And you start to learn through that process what waiting does. I don't need to act. I don't need to fix. If I wait, a new insight will arrive and I can witness and trust the world more. I hope that made sense. Those are my tools. And before I close, I want to thank my latest sponsors. Thank you, everyone who supports the show. I really appreciate it. If anybody has the means, you can visit my page on Patreon or you can visit yaywithme.com. If you don't have the means, I totally understand. If you could share this with someone, it could help. That helps me as well. So, in closing, having recently witnessed transformation in my own life and in people I love's lives, I just want to remind you that it is possible and it's happening all the time, even when you can't see it. And to get there, it means you have to kind of go toward the friction and go toward the content that is arising. And by that I mean go into the thing that you're afraid to look at in terms of like what it means about you. I think we defend especially hard against the feelings that we feel bad about ourselves around. And that is why we kind of stay paused in certain areas. So my invitation today is just to walk toward those feelings especially the ones that you're like, I don't want to feel bad about myself because they have a gift embedded in them. They have a potential for change embedded in them. And that is the key to change is just being like accountable to the truth and not pathologizing it, not running from it, just noticing it and treating it like objective information. It's objective feedback. So when we can start to kind of sort through these little turds of insight, we can start to see what's old that's activating us, that's taking over, and what's new that's true for us. We can start to divide them in half and see like where they begin and end. And that is how we grow. It's always an opportunity for growth. I talk a lot about my own growth on this show, but one thing that has recently really created a lot of growth for me is just that simple thing, just going toward the feelings that I'm like, I really hate this. I really don't like this. And it's always a capsule of growth and change. And that makes our life better immediately. As soon as you can like pop it open, it's like it immediately creates an insight that creates room for change. So I hope this is helpful. I send you my love and don't forget to smile.